TurfShowTimes, and we are doing a special edition of Ram It Down Your Throat because the draft is next week. How you doing, Misone?
Doing good, doing good. Ready to
All right, so
talk some draft.
basically, I guess we're just gonna sit here and I guess pretend we're Les Snead and just kind of go through what he might be thinking come Friday.
Cool. Love playing GM.
Yeah, of course. It's fun. We'll have a good time tonight. All right, so I guess looking at this draft from a fan standpoint, and Les Snead as well. How big of a draft is this for Les Snead? Because from up until this point, it's kind of been Jeff Fisher's kind of been, I guess, the guy in charge, and this is one where Les Snead is seen as the guy. So from Les Snead's standpoint, how much pressure is it on you to get it right and make sure you've done your homework?
With Les, I think that this draft is kind of like you said, the first time where he's kind of got like full call of like how everything's going, like he's the man, but he's kind of been building up to this. I think last year, it was pretty well, it was made well known that the whole Jared Goff deal was all Les Snead. He got the ball rolling with that. He started the conversations with the Titans way back at the combine, and he was the one that really first started to get the ball going and like, let's make this move and then let's go get Jared Goff. Like, he really got the ball going. I think that was the first time that we really ever heard of Les Snead really being the guy to make the moves, make things happen. So I think that he's prepared after, in the years of being sitting back and letting someone else call all the shots, and then finally starting to get his feet wet. I think he's kind of just been groomed a bit. But the problem is he was groomed by Jeff Fisher, who hasn't had the greatest success. He didn't exactly have the greatest success, obviously, since he's no longer there. So, yeah, that's probably the one thing about it. So, yeah, I would definitely say this is a huge draft for him because it's like his first one. And it's like, did you learn the things that you need to learn from Jeff Fisher of what not to do, or did you just kind of take everything and run with it? So I think it should be an interesting draft, whether good or bad. We're gonna find out some things.
Exactly, and I'm interested too. They fired Fisher, but they kept Snead, and I think that says something. That shows, I think, what Kroenke and Demoff think of Snead, and hopefully it pays off for him. But I guess we'll see. And something a lot different than other drafts is that while in the first couple of years of the Les Snead era, the Rams benefited from the RG3 trade. They benefited from having multiple draft picks in the first round. And move on to now 2017. They don't have a single pick in the first round. So what kind of approach is Snead taking, do you think, here? Is he what does his board look like? Is he just focusing on the bottom round guys, bottom of the first round guys, or like what is he focusing on?
It's really interesting because it's like the Rams I think people have gotten so used to seeing the Rams with all these draft picks, especially in the early rounds, since 2012. They constantly had extra picks. As part of the reason they were able to move up and get Goff last year is because they had, the extra second round pick, and they was really put in position to make that type of move from previous moves. And if there was ever a time to have a lot of picks early on, this will probably be the draft. So it's like now that they don't have those early picks, I mean, they could have had a pick in the top 5 in the first round, and they could have had another another third round pick, and it could have been a completely different draft that they're going into. So since when you take away those picks, and then you start looking at, okay, well, this is a really loaded draft. It's really, really deep, especially in the skill position. The weaker positions is probably offensive line, things like that. But as far as the skill positions go, this is a really, really deep draft. And the Rams kind of need something, a little bit of everything kind of all over, so there's no real, this is the one big need, or, they should really just focus on this. I'm personally of the mindset that they should be looking for a receiver. But you can't really fault them for going any direction whatsoever. I think that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a common misconception is, the Rams don't have a first round pick, but they do have 8 picks. They have 8 picks in this draft. They have a decent amount. So they can they can go for a variety of positions and be okay. And
Yeah,
like you said, it is deep.
very deep. So it's like they're almost in a can't miss spot. Now that's not to say that they won't miss on their pick, but they can't miss on the position, because where they're drafting, there's still going to be a lot of talent regardless of position. Even the offensive line, which is really thin in this draft, there's actually where they're drafting is probably going to be where the offensive linemen are going to be the most valued, actually. So I've only mocked so far 4 linemen in the first round, and speaking with Dan Hartman, he was saying that he sees it the same way. That he only sees 4 linemen going in the first round. So there's going to be a lot of linemen there sitting there at the top of the second round. And I think it's going to be like the hot spot. If ever there was a time that a team might offer the Rams some type of package to jump in there and grab that pick and have the Rams move down, this might be the draft where that would happen because there's so much talent all over the board.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you're seeing what sort of a strategy are you going into this draft having? Are you looking to be more aggressive, or do you just kind of let the draft come to you?
I mean, I don't think it's possible for Les Snead to be to just kind of be chill. He's a fan of trading. It's something he said from day one.
No, he's made moves in the past.
Yeah, he made maybe 1 or 2. He's a big fan of moving around the board. So and he has it honest. He learned from Thomas Dimitroff, who's not afraid to move around the board. He made one of the biggest and most impactful jumps in recent memory with trading all the way up with the Browns to get Julio Jones. So it's not like it just kind of comes out of nowhere. He learned from one of the guys that love to move the most in the NFL. So he's all about moving around the board. The Rams have yet to sit still in any draft since he's been a part of the team. I just don't think that there's any way that he won't be aggressive. That's kind of what he is. That's what he brings to the table. It's how he likes to do it. He's always open for business, as they say.
I kind of get that feeling too. And, because they don't have a first-round pick, they do have an extra 4th rounder and an extra 6th rounder. So in what scenario would you think, will they look to maybe trade up and maybe get a Corey Davis or something if he's there at like pick 20 to 24, what scenario would you look to be trading up?
I just kind of touched on this a bit in my most recent mock. It's something where I think people here trade up, and when you're talking about the first round, they think, oh, you don't want to move up too much in the first round because it's so expensive. You don't want to mortgage your future. And, these are the type of things you hear people say. And that might be true when you're talking about the top 10. But once you get out of the top 10, the value of the first round pick drops significantly. And when you get to the bottom 12 picks in the first round, at 20 to 32 range, it's not even the same ballpark at all. When I was doing the research on it, I realized that since 2012, there's been 5 times a team traded back into the first round. And of those 5 times, not one team lost a future first round pick. Not one team lost a future second round pick. The average cost of it was a second rounder and a 4th rounder in that draft. And the biggest jump was 23 spots by the Vikings when they went up to get Cordero Patterson. And they gave up a second round pick, a 4th round pick, a 6th round pick, and then I believe a 5th round pick of the following year. So it wasn't as expensive as far as value picks would go. And to move up 23 spots to go back into the first round, I mean, you're talking about picking at spot number 20 in the second round and moving up to 29 in the first round. And that's all they gave up. Like, that's unbelievable. In this particular situation, the Rams wouldn't even be moving that far. They'd be moving up about 10 to 12 spots, which would theoretically cost them about a 2nd and 4th round pick, and maybe you would throw in a 5th round pick next year, 6th round pick next year, something like that.
Exactly. And, I mean, I guess we've mentioned the draft is deep. Are they better off just staying pat and just staying at pick number 37, or, who are you looking to drop into that 25 range maybe? Who are you looking to trade up for?
And I think you mentioned it, Corey Davis. That would be really good value there. If you can get a Forrest Lamp, or you got to get a top talent. A guy that's available there that you didn't expect to be available. You don't really want to trade up just for anybody, or you You don't want to trade up just because the person feels a position of need. You want to trade up because they're going to make an extreme impact and they're going to be game changer. That's what you want to go get. So if you see one of those guys available, then you have to go get them. Especially when you're a team that's in dire need of that big time spark, that playmaker who's going to make plays no matter what it is, no matter what the position is. Linemen can make plays too. So
exactly, yeah.
if you see that opportunity to go get one and you have him rated really highly on your board, I just don't think it makes any sense to do anything other than go get him.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I mean, I think if somehow Corey Davis drops, I think you have to go get him. Or like you said, a Forrest Lamper. If somebody like that drops to the 20s, you definitely have to consider going up to get him. But I mean, while we discuss trades, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
What teams are you looking at to maybe that would be willing to trade back?
I would say teams that's actually conveniently the teams that's in that range where the Rams were to be in the Rams price range, where they wouldn't have to give up more than a second and a fourth and maybe, some throw-in pick, would be like the Raiders or the Texans, teams who are pretty well established. The Texans are looking for a quarterback. After you get past the top two, Deshaun Watson and Mitch Trubisky, it gets really murky, there. The Texans,
and I mean, depending on how high you have Patrick Mahomes ready on your board, maybe he's at 37 for them.
Exactly.
You never know.
There's a very good chance that either Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Kaiser is there at pick 37. There's a very, very good chance that happens. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility that one of them is available. So if you're, and that's even if they're who the Texans value most after those two players. It could very well be another quarterback. I think that far too often, the media and who they cover the most kind of sucks people in to think, oh, well, this is the order of the top quarterbacks, in this year's draft. When so often that's not even the case. There's a lot of guys get a lot more hype than other players, but it does. Like Davis Webb is a player that's, talked about more when you really start talking to scouts and things like that. You hear his name come up a lot, because he has a lot of tools that, he's the big quarterback. He's got that prototype size that you want in your quarterback, 6'6", 230, cannon for an arm, has better mobility than what you would expect. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that you can see that a team might be more interested in as that third quarterback after the top two.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I mean, you kind of touched on it. The media, they make all these mock drafts, they make all these big boards, they rank their players in positions and everything. And at the end of the day, we don't really know what the teams are thinking. So I mean, there's a chance that there's a guy that the media has rated somewhat high that drops into the second round.
Yeah.
Who are a few of those guys that could drop to the Rams at 37?
At quarterback or just any position?
Just in general, like who's the guy that could fall to the Rams that when he's there, Leslie goes, oh my God, like 37, we have to take this guy.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like when you really think about it, because this draft is so deep, everybody can't go in the first round. So there's going to be, and I've said this since, December or November or something like that, there's probably going to be a total of 45 to 50 guys who could go in the first round in certain drafts. So there's legitimate borderline, at the very least, first round talent through 50 players in this year's draft. So when you start looking at the players that's going to start falling over, it's not out of the realm of the possibility that you could see a Jared Davis there. And with the things that's happened recently with Reuben Foster, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Reuben Foster's there in the second round. You're going to see Lyman slipping over into the second round. You're going to see Evan Ingram he's that kind of hot name after he blew up the combine. But yeah. Evan Ingram is actually, probably the tight end in this class who's shown the most as a receiving tight end. Because he's caught so many passes. He was used a lot. He was a primary target. So Evan Ingram is a guy who not necessarily would fall to the second round, but could cause other tight ends to fall to the second round, like a David Njoku, who I love personally, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if somehow he's still there at the beginning of round two. and receivers, you look at Zay Jones and you look at Juju Smith-Schuster, I think people have really kind of grown accustomed to the love and the hype of the Mike Williams and John Ross and Corey Davis. But this time last year, Juju Smith-Schuster was viewed as, hey, if he could have came out as a sophomore, as a true sophomore, he probably would have been a top 20 pick. So and then this year he goes back, and this year he gets hurt. He's playing with a broken hand, things like that. His stock drops some. So I don't think teams have forgotten what they saw last year. And if anything, playing with a broken hand probably made his value go up even more. So there's going to be a nice little crop of receivers that's going to be there at the top of the second round, and there's going to be a lot of secondary players as well. Just that's the deepest part of the draft. So you're going to see a lot of guys sitting there ready to go.
As much as we would like to have the fifth pick of the first round. If it was any year not to have a first round pick, this might be the year, just because it is so deep. I mean, as much as the Rams need offense, if a guy like Jared Davis fell to them at 37 and the Rams took him, I wouldn't be disappointed by any stretch. He's a game changer on defense, I think. And I mean, if Foster falls, you have to take him. Yeah. But the Rams, they do have needs all over the roster. Do you think offense or defense is the pick there? Because I mean, there are so many options on either side, and they have so many holes. Which direction should they go?
I would say that the Rams have to go offense, and the reason being is I've myself, including everyone else, we've all talked about it. The Rams secondary is not going to be the same next year.
No,
everybody's a free agent. Everyone's a free agent next year. And so, you got E.J. Gaines, you got Tremaine Johnson, you got Maurice Alexander, you have LaMarcus Joyner, even Cody Davis. You got 4 of your starters, and then your top backup safety all headed towards free agency next year. And if you were to bring back, for example, Tremaine Johnson and E.J. Gaines, there's no way you're going to sign both LaMarcus Joyner and Maurice Alexander. You might not even sign either one of them because of the money that you would invest in those two. And let's not forget, the number one priority going into free agency after this season will be Alec Ogletree. Okay, yeah. So Alec Ogletree is a guarantee to get paid, which means that you automatically, whatever salary cap space they have is going to be cut down, and now you're looking at the rest of the secondary, like, who can we keep? So secondary is something where you thinking in your head, we have to bring in because we're gonna lose somebody.
How much of that is going through Lesty's head? I mean, that has to be in the back of his mind that
it has to be
of losing all these players.
Yeah, it's there in his head because he just lost a secondary. So it's like, I can't do this again. However, I still say offense because the focus is Jared Goff. The team, there's no player on this team that's more heavily invested in than Jared Goff. He's the player that you just brought in. You just traded away all these picks. He was the number 1 overall pick. And you brought in Sean McVay with the idea that he can make Jared Goff what you want him to be. He can fix this offense starting with Jared Goff. Jared Goff has been the center of attention since the pick was made last year. So with that being the case, it only makes sense that this is who your focus is on. You're wanting to get as much talent around him as possible. Again, that's not necessarily just receiver. While I think the pick should be receiver, don't be surprised if the pick is a lineman. That shouldn't be a shock. Remind you, Andrew Whitworth, who I had as the number 1 player that we should go after in free agency, he's 35 years old. Yeah. So he's still an all-pro player. He's still very reliable. He's been very healthy, but he doesn't have very many years left before he's retiring. And Greg Robinson was a colossal bust. I don't think he's going to succeed on the right side either. He's probably best suited for a guard, but you have to think about the fact that you need a center. John Sullivan is someone who hasn't really performed in years due to injury. He was one of the best centers in the league, for years prior to injury, but since injuries, he hasn't really done anything in about 3 years. And then Andrew Whitworth, he's 35, and Greg Robinson really hasn't done much. They've made some good additions, but this line is still very far away from being ready to protect Jared Goff for years on end.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't be shocked.
And I mean, like, I mean, it's as important as having a top wide receiver is. I mean, that's definitely important. The offense, it all starts up front. I mean, you saw what you just look at the Dallas Cowboys. They invest all these picks in offensive linemen, and you put a 4th-round pick in Dak Prescott. That's not saying he's not good, but I mean, his chances to succeed are a lot better when he has time to throw and analyze the field.
Yeah, absolutely. It made the world of a difference. And again, like you said, that's not to say he's not good, because he still has to make the accurate throw. He still has to get the ball where it needs to be, which he did. But by giving him the time to do that, it allowed him to kind of just be more comfortable and trust that he's going to have the time needed to go through his reads and make the right choice. Jared Goff didn't necessarily get that. Jared Goff, he struggled with a lot of things on his own, like reading the blitz, being able to pre-snap reads and identifying the blitz. And, if anyone that watched the Cardinals game, they saw them really take advantage of that, so teams are going to see, hey, this is his weak spot. We need to attack it. But then also when teams aren't attacking that, you still got to figure out a way to block 3 rushers, 4 rushers with 5 linemen. Like, if you can't do that, then you're going to have a long day. And that was the case with the Rams this past year. There was too often teams was only rushing 3 or 4 people when we were getting to the quarterback.
So, I mean, you're sitting there, you're waiting for your pick at 37. What's a best case scenario? What's a worst case scenario for Les Snead come Friday?
Best case scenario at 37 is that somehow you get a top wide receiver that falls to you, or you get one of the top linemen that falls to you. And the top wide receivers to me is Corey Davis, Mike Williams, and John Ross. Best case scenario, I don't think that John Ross falls. I personally don't think he does. He's a very underrated player to the sense of people look at him and they just think speed, deep threat. But he's actually a very good route runner. Very good route runner. He has good hands as well. So I don't think that he's just this deep threat. I think he can play multiple positions in wide receiver, and because he's such a good route runner, and he ran a lot of pro style routes in Washington. I think, and then you add on that speed. I think that he's probably there's a very good chance he could be the first receiver taken. Corey Davis and Mike Williams, they both have things that's kind of going against them. I personally think Corey Davis is the best wide receiver in this draft, but because he's hurt his ankle and he's also from that small school label, and he had, I believe, 11 drops over the past 2 years, this year. He had 11 drops his final year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and which was really high because he didn't have 11 drops between the previous 2 years, but 11 drops, and then he was not going to be able to work out. He's probably not going to be full 100% until May or June, and which will be obviously after the draft. And then they have that whole small school label on him, so there's things working against him that could actually cause him to drop. And just in talking with different people in the scouting community, you hear people say, "Oh, I like him this much. And I like him, but I don't know if he's a top 15 pick, a top 10, top 15 pick." So his range is kind of anywhere from top 10 to top 40. He's all over the place depending on who you talk to. And Mike Williams is just
and like you said, I mean, John Ross, he's a good receiver, but I don't think people really knew who he was until he ran his 40 at the combine. And I think that hype and him rising has definitely caused Davis to fall. And if that does happen, that is probably best case scenario for the Rams, whether or not them be trading up, or if he does fall to the second round somehow.
Yeah, if he can fall to the second round, that would be a best case scenario. If you can get a Ryan Remchick or a Garrett Bowles, one of those guys to somehow fall to the second round or fall within trading range, which I think they both will likely be there in trading range. But again, it goes back to, do you trade up for this player? Is he that player that you looked at and you was like, he was going to be such a difference maker, and we had him rated so high on our board, and now he's here? Or is it we expected him to be here, we should go get him? So that's kind of where that's kind of where the water gets murky, and you got to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think something that's definitely needs to be discussed, I guess, before the draft is, this is Sean McVay's first draft. It's his first NFL coaching job. It's his first time doing this. How much I guess Snead has done this, 5 years now. Mm-hmm. How much are you listening to your first time head coach?
You have to listen to him, especially since he is going to also be the primary play caller. He may not be the quote unquote offensive coordinator, but he's going to be your play caller. So he's running the offense, so he knows what he needs. And you have to take that input that he has. Like, hey, for this system, we need a player that can do this, or a player that's really good at this. We need a receiver that good at these type of routes because these are the ones that we're going to make. This is going to be our bread and butter. We need a back who's really good at pass protection because we don't want to throw it to them a lot. We want them to stay in and give us an extra lineman, or we want a back who can go out there and catch the ball. We want a back who can run in between the tackles. Whatever it is that you need, you have to communicate that, and you have to make sure that you're the person making the picks understands, what this offense and what this defense is going to be all about. So when they're making those picks, because that's probably the number one thing that gets overlooked when players are being picked is, are they a good fit? And if you're not taking that into account, then you're really taking a huge risk because that player may not pan out, which is usually the case. More players don't pan out from being a bad fit than just not being a good player. So you definitely want to take into consideration what he's saying. You definitely want to listen to him. Again, yes, Leslie has been doing this for 5 years, but like we already said, this is his first time himself of being like the shot caller, like all the way. So they're both kind of in new roles.
Yeah. So in the end, you're sitting there at 37. Who's your pick? Who's your guy?
At 37, if I'm sitting there at 37, if I'm being realistic. I'm probably looking receiver, and I'm probably looking at either a Zay Jones or a Juju Smith-Schuster.
Okay, I'm in the same realm. I love Zay Jones. I think he can be a top-notch receiver, and if he's there for them at 37, I think they almost have to take him.
Yeah.
So I guess some names being also thrown around for Rams are a guy like Godwin. You mentioned Schuster. Both I think have potential to drop to, I guess, the middle of the second round, late second round, maybe top of the third round, and they're both really talented guys. If they're who the Rams are looking at and they can't trade back and they don't want to risk losing them in the third round, would it be worth? Do you think it's worth reaching for one of them, or are you better off sticking to your board?
No, it's never worth the reach. Because you build your board for a reason, and when you look at the board, you say, okay, this is the player that I think is the best, and this is the next best, and this is the next best. You want to take especially with a team like the Rams who have so many needs. The Rams can really throw darts and hit a player like, oh, he feels a need, so they can follow their board and get the best player available and feel a massive need, so you really don't want to reach ever in any draft, but especially when you have so many holes. And right now the Rams have a starting secondary, but you can still draft a safety or a corner and say this fills a need because, as mentioned, like they're not going to all be back. You're going to need this player next year. And if you have your starters in place now and this player gets to develop some and there's no pressure for him to play too many snaps right away, that's even better for you because now he's really kind of coming in because everyone says, oh, well, the Rams don't have a first round pick. They can't really sacrifice, or use a value pick or, just the pleasure of taking a player that's not going to play, like, for example, a Sidney Jones. I disagree because the Rams aren't really in a position to make a run or anything like that right now.
Exactly. I mean, I think you have to think about you're building for 3 years from now. You're not building for next year. You're building for 3 years from now. I mean, like they were 4-12 last year. They're not going to go 4-12 to 11-5. It's just not going to happen.
I've seen it happen, but it doesn't happen far enough to believe that that's going to be the case. They really are building for the future. I know that they said that they didn't want to call it a rebuild, but that's what it is. The roster is thinned out so much over the last couple of years, and they're really not in position to say, oh well, we don't have we don't have the opportunity to waste things because we need players to play now. That's not true.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess moving on to the third round. If they do go offense in round 2, do they have to go defense in round 3? Or if they go defense in round 1, do they have to go offense in round 3? I guess how do you balance that?
I don't think so. I think it kind of goes back to the whole playing your board, staying true to your board and taking the players that you have there. If you have an offensive player, because, again, you're not one offensive player away on offense. You need a receiver. You need yourself more linemen. Like, that line has to be rebuilt. And I wouldn't be shocked at all to see a tight end get drafted either. Like, I think people really aren't taking into consideration how much Sean McVay loves his tight ends.
Yeah.
He loves his tight ends. They have so much success under him, regardless of who's playing. Reed got hurt, and they didn't miss a beat. It was like Jordan Reed's down, next guy up. Vernon Davis came in, but they still love to run multiple tight end sets. And you saw guys like Logan Paulson, who was like fourth or fifth on their depth chart to start the season, come in and really be productive. So he's kind of that guy who can really take a tight end and just make it work. He loves his tight ends, and he ran 3 tight end sets more than anyone. So I definitely wouldn't be shocked to see them take a tight end as well. They need a receiver. I'm one of the people that feel like they need another running back as well. And that's not to say kick Todd Gurley out the door, but you need a back that's going to fit the system, and you need that change of pace.
Spicy, crispy chicken sandwich.
you need a guy that's going to be able to change the pace. You need a guy that's going to be able to fit the system. You're going to need you're going to need more alignment. You need the center. You need 2 tackles. It's definitely something where they can take offense and then come back and take offense again, or they can take defense and come back and take defense again.
Yeah, I mean there are needs all over the roster. I mean, like you said, they can throw a dart and there's a need. And you did say too, like Sean McVay is a guy that loves his tight ends. Jordan Reed became one of the best tight ends in the NFL under him.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have Tyler Higbee already on the roster. How much do you look at a guy like Tyler Higbee, who did basically nothing last year, but was a highly touted tight end coming out of college? How much do you take him into account as far as drafting a tight end in this draft too? Like, do you take one in the 2nd or 3rd round, or do you wait until maybe the 4th round or 4th or 5th round to take one?
I mean, I personally love Tyler Higbee. He was my favorite tight end in last year's draft, just from a talent perspective and just a really good pass catcher. I love Tyler Higbee coming out, and then you add in his size, and he runs unbelievably well. I was a huge fan. I was thrilled that the Rams picked him up. So it has to be taken into consideration, but you also have to take into consideration the system. Again, McVay runs a lot of 2 tight ends, and he again ran 3 tight ends more than anybody. Like, it's still mind-boggling to me that he ran 3 tight end sets as many times as he did. But he loves to run the 12 personnel. Like, it's something that he loves to do. So you're going to have 2 tight ends on the field often, and if you can have another really good tight end, it's kind of a game changer, because now you have sort of that a guy stretching the seam. You have guys that you can split out wide. Now they do have Tamarick Hemingway, who I also liked last year. I think that he has a lot of potential. At the tight end
he's
position.
got a size. The size isn't an issue.
Yeah, 6'5", 244. Can really run well. He's a natural pass catcher, much like Tyler Higbee. So the Rams have 2 very young, talented tight ends there in their staple, but it would not shock me at all to see them use a 3rd or 4th round pick on another tight end.
And then, do you look to trade out of the 3rd round to get back into the 2nd round at all, or are you looking to stay pat there in the 3rd?
It's funny. I've been asked this a lot. When it comes to moving back up into the 2nd round, I would not be shocked at all to see it happen. Again, Les Snead is a person who likes to move around. However, I'm not sold that it would happen for 2 reasons. One, the 3rd and 4th round is expected to be, just a harvest. It's supposed to be a lot of players there in the 3rd and 4th round. I think the bottom of the 2nd round is kind of that dead period. That when you get to the 55 to the 60, the 55 to the 64 range, things kind of start to change a bit, because those players, they're all good players still, but a lot of them are going to be those guys that you think should be top of the 3rd round picks. They still can be difference makers, but they don't carry the value as the players. It literally goes from a lot of 1st round guys to a few 2nd rounds to a lot of really, 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 really good 3rd round players. Guys who, if you draft a receiver, you feel like he's going to be able to come in and he's going to be like a dominant number 2. Maybe not a number 1 at any point in his career, but he's going to be one of those guys that could be a number 2 that really changes the game for you. Sort of like a like Marvin Jones was to AJ Green, sort of. You know, a guy who can come in and get you 850 yards receiving and get you 10 touchdowns. That's what you're looking at in that third round at the receiver position. And you're going to find starters at corner, and you're going to find starters at linebacker and defensive end and safety. So the third round and fourth round is going to be really valuable.
And I mean, speaking of those types of players, the Rams lost one of those players in the offseason, a guy like Benny Cunningham. And I mean, he's a guy I think they have to try to replace, and I don't know if Dunbar is the answer there. I don't know how far Mixon is going to drop. He could go in the first round. He could really go anywhere, really. Yeah. Do you take him if he's there in the third round? Is he a guy you take a risk on?
Yes. Here's why. I look at him and I see a faster, let me put the emphasis on that, a faster version of David Johnson. You know, he can literally do everything. Mm-hmm. David Johnson was a third-round pick, you know, but if you can go back and you do it again, I guarantee you David Johnson's a top 5 pick. You know, if they know what they know now, they can go back and they do it again. He's a top 5 pick. He's a faster version of David Johnson. They're identical in size, actually. They're both about 6'1", 230 pounds, but he's faster and can do everything that he does. He can catch the ball like a receiver the same way that David Johnson does. David Johnson is a former receiver, and you see Joe Mixon line up at receiver and run routes like a receiver. And then you see him go line up in the backfield, and you see him able to run from the gun. You see him able to run, line up out wide and motion to the backfield and play football without the ball. You know, he can do really well. And so when you see a player like that who might be the best back in the draft, it's definitely debatable. And there was just the Milwaukee Sentinel did a poll this past weekend of, you know, who's the best running back in the draft, and he got votes for being the best. You know, so you know, and that's just strictly off of skill and what you've seen on tape. You know, that's not character being included. If you're going strictly off skill and what you've seen on tape, there's a very good case that's being made that he's the best back in his draft, better than Dalvin Cook, better than Leonard Fournette, you know, better than Christian McCaffrey. You know, so it would be hard for me to not grab him in the third round. I think value is too.
You know, when you have a guy like Todd, a couple of years ago when the Rams took Trey Mason, I think it was Trey Mason who tweeted "yikes," or maybe it was Zach Stacy that tweeted hashtag "yikes." Is this a hashtag "yikes" moment for Todd Gurley? Like, if they take a running back high, what's Todd Gurley thinking?
You know what? It's funny because I think it is, but it shouldn't be. You know, and the reason I say it is because Gurley showed a lot of immaturity, I guess you should say, this year. You know, early in the year, when the Rams were actually winning, when they were 3-1, Gurley was still pouting. Yeah. You know, he was still pouting. Forget the fact the team won. He was upset at the fact that, you know, oh man, I only averaged 1.8 yards a carry this game. I only averaged 2.6 yards a carry this game. Like, he was upset about that, and a lot of that fell on his own shoulders. You know, a lot was made about Gurley's, you know, offensive line not making holes. But even when they made holes, he was missing them a lot. And Jamal Brown. No, Jamal Brown called him out on it at the end of the season, which I loved because you have to do that. You know, you have to be able to call guys out and be like, hey, you need to step up too, you know. And that's what Jamal Brown did. Was he literally said, you know, he's not running on the same page with us. He's missing holes. Like, that was the truth. And so I think it would be a yikes moment for Gurley, but I don't think it should be, because if anything, it should make Gurley more valuable, because when you put up formation together where you have those two on the field together, it takes so much pressure off of him, you know, and he can do things that Gurley can't do. You know, he can put Gurley in position to hit runs that he couldn't hit before, because the defense is so gassed from chasing around a running back and running routes and things like that. And out of nowhere, you switch it up and you throw in his power back and you get golf under center and just turn around and hand it over. It's a two-headed monster that people really don't like to see. I would say the best example of it in recent memory would be when Jonathan Stewart was drafted, even though they had D'Angelo Williams. And it worked out unbelievably well. They both were 1,000-yard rushers. You know,
and I mean, you look what Atlanta did last year with Freeman with Freeman and Coleman. I mean, having them like that was the most dynamic duo in running backs in the NFL last year. And I mean, when you have a play caller like Sean McVay, who has an offensive mind like none other in this league, the options are endless there.
Yeah, and that's why I say it probably will be a yikes moment, because I think that's more so Gurley's character than it actually being a yikes moment. But I think that it would be beneficial to Gurley as well as Goff. I think that having a guy like Joe Mixon and then having a Gurley in the backfield, especially if, let's just say hypothetically, the Rams can get one of the top 3 receivers in this year's draft, right? And then they trade up to get him. But as I said, you don't have to lose your 3rd round pick to move up and get a player in the back end of the first. So let's say they trade up and they get a Corey Davis or a Mike Williams. Okay, so now you got your new number 1. Okay, and then you still have your 3rd round pick, and Joe Mixon's there, and you get Joe Mixon. Goff is officially the happiest person in the NFL because his life just got so much easier, because not only did you add 2 impact players, but you also completely confused defensive coordinators across the landscape, because they don't really know what they want to do at this point. Yes, they're going to try. The first thought is going to be, let's still stop the run and let's still blitz the hell out of Goff. But if you are a smart offensive mind, which I believe McVay is, you're going to start changing things. You're going to have more hot reads. You're going to have things where the ball is coming out quick to, negate that pass rush and negate that blitz. And then all of a sudden the box loosens up. And now you have this 2-headed monster here absolutely running wild. So the more weapons, the better.
Exactly. And I think another guy that has question marks is a guy like Sidney Jones. How far can he drop in? I mean, I think you have to take him if he's there, but how much are you worried about his injury, about his ankle and going forward?
I'm not terribly worried about it. I think a lot of talk with injuries these days are still kind of built on what it used to be. When you hear people talk about ACL injuries, it's like, oh no, he tore his ACL. He'll never be the same again. When now guys are coming back from ACLs in 8 months. It's not the same as it used to be. Medicine has changed so much. The rehab has changed so much. So when you hear certain injuries, it's not the same. I mean, you look at Jalen Smith last year. Here's a guy that was looked at as a top 5 pick. And after his injury, everyone said, oh, he's going to fall to the 4th round. He's going to fall to the 5th round. You were hearing some later round picks the closer you got to the draft, and the Cowboys go and take him in the 2nd round. Well, then the report comes out, and he had nerve damage. He couldn't really feel his toes. His foot, they said, would drag when he would run. And then the report comes out this week that now he's got feeling back in his toes and he's running full speed. Mm-hmm. And so you look at you just kind of look across the landscape of the draft the past couple of years. Teams are not afraid to draft a guy that's hurt. Gurley was drafted hurt. So for a Ram fan to say, oh, we can't draft Sidney Jones because he's hurt, but it was okay to draft Todd Gurley, it's like that doesn't make sense. Sidney Jones, in my personal opinion, was the best corner in this draft. Is the best corner in this draft.
For sure, yeah, he was up there.
Yeah, so if you can get yourself a top 10 pick in the 2nd round, absolutely. However, I don't think he falls to the 3rd round. I don't think Sidney Jones makes it out of the top 50 picks. I still think he's going to be a very high pick. He might not be the top 10 pick he was going to be. But then again, Gurley still made it in the top 10. So I wouldn't be shocked if he did go in the top 10, top 15. There's a very good chance Sidney Jones could go in the 1st round, but he doesn't fall further than the top 50.
All right. Today, I believe you did put a mock draft out on TurfShowTimes on the website. Mm-hmm. Who are you looking at in the 3rd round? Who's the guy or two that you're looking at drafting?
The guys that I mocked, or like just who could be there.
Who could be there, and then like who's your top guy? Like who are you picking there?
For me, I think that when you talk about the draft, the center position has always kind of been undervalued a little bit. You always see centers slide. You never see a center go in the top 20 picks. Very rarely do you even see a center go in the 1st round. I think the last center to go in the 1st round was Travis Frederick, which turned out great for the Cowboys. Yeah. But usually you don't see them go very high. So I
and
would
I mean, that's pretty odd because I think you can make the case that the center is the second most important position on the
yeah, absolutely.
making protection calls and everything. Like,
Absolutely, which is the irony of it all, you know. So, but you know, when usually the centers are going to be picked, and the best centers, the starting centers, are usually picked in the second to third round range. So I think once you get to that third round, you know, and you start getting into the thick of it, you really got to start looking at center. Because the Rams have to address that position. Like, it's probably the most pressing position on the offensive side of the ball. Because me personally, I don't trust John Sullivan's health anymore.
no.
He hasn't been able to stay healthy, you know. And even if he was to play the entire year, it's been a while since he's played healthy. You know, there's probably going to be a lot of rust. And even if he's not rusty, he's 30. He's going to be 32 years old when the season starts. You know, so how many years does he have? And besides, they only signed him for 1 year anyway. You have to address your center position. It's probably a bigger need than receiver, corner, or anything else on the team.
I mean, exactly. And when I can't, his name's escaping me, but they tried to sign that restricted free agent out of Buffalo, and then they missed out on him. But yeah, I mean, I think center is probably one of the most important positions that they do need to address. They haven't gotten it right. They tried they tried drafting the Alabama center a couple of years ago, and that didn't work out. And yeah, I mean, if they can get a guy like Pochich or maybe Elfine here in the third round, that'd be, I think, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the fourth round. I mean, you have 2 picks, and honestly, they might be the most important picks in the draft. Would you agree?
Yeah, because it's kind of like the tail end of that mass rush to grab that really good talent. You know, as I've said, this draft is about a round and a half to 2 rounds off. You know, because it's so deep. You're going to see players that normally in a lot of drafts. You know, I like to use the 2013 draft as an example because I thought it was a really weak draft just across the board, regardless of position. You know, you're going to see players that in a lot of drafts would be, you know, if they're a 4th round pick, they could have been like a late 2nd. You know, so you're gonna have those players kind of lingering around. Well, after the 4th, it tails off big time. You know, you see a huge change in the overall talent. It starts to get sort of back on track. You know, you start to see 5th round picks who's probably a 5th round pick in most drafts. You know, you're going to see 6th round picks who's probably a guaranteed 6th round pick in most drafts. You know, so with it starting to tail off, and it's going to tail off quick. It won't be immediate. You're still going to have guys that's in the 5th round who probably in some drafts could have been a early 4th, late 3rd, early 4th, but it's going to tail off pretty quickly there. So I would say that it's probably true that those 2 picks are going to be the most important because it's like this is your last chance to get some impact players, to get some possible starters. You know, that is going to be there in that 4th round.
Ideally, do you keep one and trade one, or would you rather keep them both? Just because you know that is kind of like the tail end of those guys that can come in and start right away, and the Rams need starters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really depends on what you're trading for. You know, if you're trading for, you know, we keep using Corey Davis as an example, but if you're trading for a player like that, you know, and you're moving up, yeah, trade it. If you're trading for a player who's going to be barely better than what you would have got in that 4th round, no. You know, you definitely want to keep it. He might be a little bit better, but he's not blowing him out of the water, you know. And again, you're getting a starter, you know, so if you can get a starter and, yeah, of course, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a starter, but you have a better chance of getting one in the 4th than you will in the 6th. You know, so if you're going to get a starter, I would definitely say that you want to take advantage of it and you want to bring that starter in. But if you can get a premier player in the draft, you know, and there's only, you know, an average of about 10 of them per draft. If you can get one, and it is a possibility, then yeah, absolutely, you want to go get that premier player and bring them in, and then then hope that you hit on your other 1st or other 4th round pick. Otherwise, you want to keep them both, and you really want to try to take advantage of what you can get.
Exactly, and I mean here. I figured out where I lost my train of thought. Oh, let's see. Okay, so where are you looking at here? Are you looking more towards the offensive side of the ball for another receiver, or this draft is deep at the cornerback position? Are you trying to get some depth there in the secondary? Because, like we mentioned earlier, you know the Rams there's potential to lose a decent amount of their secondary again next season.
Yeah, you know, I really think that that fourth round, you got to attack that secondary. There's going to be some legitimate talent left in that secondary, both safety and corner. There's going to be starters sitting there in the fourth round. It wouldn't be a shock to see a Delano Hill from Michigan or anything like that sitting there in the fourth round. Even Eddie Jackson, who's had injury concerns, could very well cause him to slide. The safety from Alabama. Josh Jones is a possibility to be there at the top of the fourth round. There's gonna be some safeties and some corners, a Howard Wilson, a DeMonte Kazi, who could possibly be sitting there in the fourth round, who can really come in and help some teams. I think the Rams are gonna really have to take advantage of that. And really go after these guys. That's why I think that's been very important that the Rams have taken the time to, and not just the Rams, but all teams, to really study up on those middle round corners and safeties, because that's going to be the hot spot for them. There's going to be a lot of players that come out of those middle rounds who, it wouldn't be a shock that 3-4 years from now we find 5 players in Pro Bowls that was drafted in the 3rd and 4th round. That's a corner or a corner or a safety, 5 to 6, 7, 8 players that came from that range. So you really want to do your research. You really want to make sure this player is a good fit. You really want to show that he's got everything that you want, but then you really want to show that he's a playmaker, a guy that can really make plays on the ball as well.
Mm-hmm. And then looking just at Lesney's history, they haven't really, these mid-round picks, they really haven't hit on in his tenure. So how much do you trust him to make these picks and get it right this time? With his track record, it's not an easy thing to do.
I mean, it's not really an easy thing for anyone to do, but then you have guys who kind of figure it out. You look at like the Seahawks, for example. They do a really good job of finding those late round picks. The Patriots do a better job of hitting in late round picks than they do early round picks. The Patriots have a terrible success rate on first and second round picks. So mm-hmm. I definitely think that it's hard, but it's not impossible. However, as you mentioned, Les Snead, just off his track record alone, is not something to get too excited about.
No.
So the Rams have had a lot of picks, whether it's the first round on through the 7th round since 2012. They've had multiple picks in every single round since 2012. They've had multiple first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 7th round picks, just based on the year. And so that's a lot of picks to have, but they haven't really hit on too many guys. And when you look at the just the overall success rate from the 5th round on down, I mean, how many guys can you really say was a real hit? I would give Zach Stacy a nod. It wasn't really his fault that they drafted Trey Mason and Todd Gurley. He didn't get another shot because he played well. He played really well. And I would give EJ Gaines, I'll give him a success rate. He was hurt this year and the year before, but he still showed to be at the very least a decent corner. Yeah. So I would call that a success, especially getting a decent corner that you can actually plug in there and start for you from the 6th round. So that's 2. Greg Zuerlein, but outside of that, it starts to really dwindle off.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It starts to really dwindle off, and that's 3 players out of the. I forget what the number is. I looked it up recently, but between the 5th and 7th rounds since 2012, I think the Rams have had something like 17 picks or something like that, something ridiculous. They had that last year or the year before last, where they had all those linemen they picked, and they picked Bud Sasser, who wasn't physically able to play, and it's like, how do you miss something like that? So they have this track record of really, really missing on picks. So I would say that the answer would be no. You don't really have the feeling that he can have success in the later rounds. You don't really have that type of faith.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, moving on to rounds 5 through 7, this is the later part of the draft. At what point does the talent level start to drop off from, okay, we're looking for contributors, we're looking for starters, to, we're just looking for guys that can maybe come in, play special teams, and play a depth role?
I would say once you get probably outside of the first 10 picks of the 5th round, it's a huge drop off. You know, you're going to see a massive dip in just the talent and production and all of that. You know, it's a huge change. And that's kind of where it starts to mellow out. You know, this draft is very deep, but after that, it starts to get on track to where your fifth round pick is a fifth round pick. You're not getting that great value that you were getting, unless it's a character issue or something that causes the player to drop, which will happen. It happens in every draft. There's going to be those players that drop, and it's going to be available in the 6th and 7th round who probably should have been drafted in round 4 or 3 or something like that. You know, there's going to be the players that go undrafted and stuff, but for the most part, they're probably in that position for a reason. You know, so it's going to cause teams to steer away. So you're gonna see that huge drop off in the 5th round, probably 10 to 15 picks in. You know, you're gonna see just a drastic change in what this player did in college and what this player did.
Mm-hmm. And then we kind of touched on it earlier. You know, the Seattle and New England. You know, a lot of their roster is built up of these 5th, 6th, 7th round picks. How crucial is it to get these picks right? Very crucial, because I think people look at it and they say, "Oh, it's just a 6th round pick. Who cares?" You know, that's so often the average fan's thought process. You know, it's like it's a throwaway pick in their mind. You know, but there's a reason teams are willing to trade for a 6th round pick. You know, there's much more value included in these picks than what they get credit for. Players are found all over the draft. You know, you can find a Hall of Famer for every round. It's just that simple. Oh, for sure, yeah. Including undrafted, you know. So while it's harder because the player may not be as talented, or they didn't have as much production, so that means they had less opportunity, which means they didn't play as much, which means they probably not as experienced as a 1st round pick. There's so many different things that really are stacked up against the players in the later rounds. But it doesn't mean that that next gem doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that the next Terrell Davis isn't out there. He is. You know, it's just a matter of you have to go find him. You have to find him, yeah. You know, so if you can be lucky enough to find him, and there's never just one. You know, there's a handful of guys per each round. You know, you're gonna find 2 to 3 guys every year in every draft who come out of the 5th round, and you're gonna find 2 to 3 guys who come out of the 6th round, and 2 to 3 guys that come out of the 7th round. Then you're gonna find like 10 guys that go undrafted, and all those players, those 15 to 20 players combined for 5th, 6th, 7th, and undrafted. 15 to 20 players every single year come out of nowhere and really perform. Right around the corner. So with that, let's see, where am I going? So in these later round picks, the Rams, they have Jared Goff, they have Sean Mannion, who was a 3rd round pick. Do you? And then I think that they just signed Murray that came out of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Do you spend one of these picks on another quarterback? You know, I've thought about this a lot, actually. Not because of Jared Goff, just because of what coaches tend to do when you're a new coach. A lot of coaches like to have their guy, and they like to have players that they can develop. The track record says, yes, there's going to be a quarterback added where McVay can make that his project, you know, a guy that he can really build. It won't be a quarterback before the 6th or 7th round, though. You know, that just won't be the case. I wouldn't be shocked if there was a quarterback. I wouldn't be shocked if it was one of the last 2 picks that they had. And at that point, if you're taking a quarterback in the 6th or 7th round like that, it's obviously not a top guy. It obviously is a project. Are you wasting a pick at that point? Because I mean, Sean Mannion was drafted as a backup quarterback in the 3rd round, and that's a pick you could have used for another position. Are you wasting a pick taking a quarterback? Do you think? No, because people said that the Redskins wasted the pick when they drafted RG3 and then turned around and drafted Kirk Cousins at number 4. Yeah. We see how that's worked out, you know. So, no, you can't really say that it's a wasted pick. For example, the Seahawks signed Matt Flynn, you know, to where I think he was making like $10 million a year or something like that, which at the time was decent starter money. Yeah. You know, it basically was the equivalent of what Sean Glennon signed for the Bears this year, where he's getting like $15 million a year, you know, to be the starting quarterback, you know, as bottom of the barrel starter. So, you know, they signed a guy who they was expecting to be their starter for at least the next 2 or 3 years.
But then they turn around and they spend a third-round pick on a quarterback, and look how it worked out. They get Russell Wilson, and it's working in their favor. They've won the Super Bowl. They've been to 2,
Yeah.
and they haven't missed the playoffs yet. So can you say that it's a wasted pick? I can see why a person would say that, but that kind of goes back to teams really appreciating the value of those late-round picks because you do find those gems.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of gems, who are some late round guys that you're really keeping an eye out on? Because I mean, they are there, and like you said, you just have to find them. And where is that? Who has that potential that can maybe come in and be a star?
Yeah, I mean, you are 100% right when you say that. I love. There's a lot of guys. I'm really big on the gems. That's one of my favorite things about scouting and watching tape and stuff is like trying to find those guys who are kind of flying under the radar, aren't getting as much hype because it's really fun for one, like digging through all these guys' college film and stuff because you really do come across a lot of players. But then also when you hit on a guy, it's like, man, how the hell did I figure that out? It's really impressive because they exist, but it's a matter of finding them. I would say a guy like Dylan Cole, I like him a lot, the linebacker from Missouri State. D'Angelo Henderson, he's actually one of my favorite backs in this draft. He reminds me so much of Maurice Jones-Drew. Young Maurice Jones-Drew, who was just this really short but well-built, like thick-framed kid
that
could really run.
Muscle dancer. He was just pure muscle.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what D'Angelo Henderson is like. He is he's an impressive back, and his game is even more impressive. He's very, very quick. He's got great straight line speed. He's one of those guys that can play, with the ball without the ball in his hands, where he can get out, run routes, he can block for you. He can do a lot of stuff. He's a really good back just all around. So I'm a huge fan of his. And then Darius Rogers, wide receiver from USC, I actually think he has the best hands in the draft. His hands are like when the ball touches it, it's not coming out. He's got very, very good hands. He does a really, really good job of just kind of snatching the ball out the air. Another receiver I really like is J.U. Chesson. I really, really like this kid's game. I know Amaro Darbo gets a lot of the hype, but I think they're equals. I think that J.U. Chesson is a player that probably could go, probably should go in the late second, early third round pick. I think he has that much potential, but he'll probably be a guy that's in the 5th or 6th round before he comes off the board. And then Brian Hill is another player that I really like, the running back from Wyoming. Big back, 6 foot, 220, 225. But he has a jump cut that reminds me a lot of Steven Jackson, which Steven Jackson's jump cut was one of the more underrated part of his game because you see this big back, who has great straight line speed, and you just think power, but he has such quick feet. And that's kind of what Brian Hill is. He's a big back with some good speed and, a lot of power, but his feet are ridiculously quick. It's an underrated part of his game.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I mean, you look, the Rams, it's kind of hard to believe, that they used to be so deep at the defensive line position, and now it seems like they don't have that depth. At what point are you looking to get maybe a defensive end or something? I personally, I love the defensive end out of Nova. I'm terrible with names. I can't remember his name, but the guy out of Nova, he's like 6'7".
Yeah, Tano passing on.
Yeah, I really like his game. Who's an edge guy that you're really looking at?
Well, it's funny because that's somebody that I'm really looking at, Tano passing on. I think he is probably there's always those few players in every draft where every team wants him. And I'm not talking about a first-round pick or a second-round pick, but a guy in the middle rounds where everybody wants him. There's not one team in the NFL that doesn't want the guy. And I think he's one of those guys this year because he's so big, he's so athletically gifted, but then he's raw. He's this piece of clay. And when you have a freak like that, everybody's like, man, the things I could do with him, the things I could teach this kid, I think that's kind of where he is this year. Another defensive end that I wouldn't mind saying is Keontae Davis from Tennessee Chattanooga. Keontae Davis, I think, is really, really flying under the radar somehow. Very productive. Has the size to line up at defensive end. in a 5-tech or a 7-tech, so it doesn't really matter if you're in a 3-4 or a 4-3. I think he can do both defensive end spots because he has the size, the speed, and the quickness and strength to do both. And then I would say, when you look at a Keon Adams, I think that he is a very quick off the line guy, a pure speed rusher. He's like a poor man's Robert Quinn when healthy,
Mm-hmm.
But those are probably 3 defensive ends that I really like in this year's draft that can be had in the middle to late rounds.
All right. So I mean that kind of covers, I guess, the draft from the second round to the 7th round. So I just want to kind of backtrack a little bit. If Rams had the choice, if you had the choice of Schuster, Godwin, or Jones, I mean, there's a lot of debate between Rams fans on these 3 guys.
Oh yeah.
Who are you taking, and why do they why are they separate from the other 2?
Okay, so here's the thing. Godwin is always going to be my number 3 in this scenario. Okay. It's not that I don't like Godwin's game. I just don't think that Godwin has number 1 potential. I think Jones and Schuster, they both have number 1 potential. They both are likely to be number 1 sooner than later. Here's the thing, that as much as I love Jones, and I like him a lot, and I've already said, I would take him if he's there at 37. I said I'd take him and then Schuster. But it's hard for me to shake what history has taught me, and I think it's one of those things where, you live and you learn. When it comes to Schuster, he has a certain thing about him that has never failed a player, and it's the passion. I've never seen a player play with passion and fail at the NFL level. The passion that he plays with, the energy, the passion, like the can't quit, playing with broken hands and stuff, like the toughness, the passion. I've never seen a player fail with that. Regardless of anything else, they're out there and they're putting it all on the line every single game, and all they want to do is win. It's all about the team. Those players always seem to have some type of success. And it's not like he's not talented. Again, I've said at the end of last year, if there was any way possible that he could have came out as a true sophomore, you're talking about a guy that was unanimously being viewed as a top 20 pick. That doesn't just go away. He played with a couple of different injuries this year, and the quarterback play wasn't the same as it was with Cody Kessler. So, of course, his numbers dropped, which is why you can't always go by just the numbers. You have to really, really go by what you see on tape as opposed to going by just the numbers. So it's really hard for me to just say Zay Jones all the time, because I really feel like Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a legitimate number 1 receiver. It's not going to be like a Julio Jones or anything like that. He'd be closer to that Dez Bryant, that true possession receiver that's just going to kill teams with his size, strength, and his ability to go up and get the ball and the passion he plays with.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, I love Zay Jones, and I do really, really like Schuster just because of that passion. And I'm going back and forth still, and I probably will up until the draft day.
Yeah.
But it is that passion of Schuster that really sticks out. But, I mean, something that I think kind of needs to be mentioned here is that USC receivers, as of recently, they don't translate well to the NFL level. I mean, you have a guy like Robert Woods, Marquise Lee, and I mean, there's others on that list too. But I mean, like Schuster, Lee was a guy that was probably a first round potential and just didn't pan out at the NFL level, or at least yet. So does that worry you at all when you look at a guy like Schuster?
It's definitely something that's brought into consideration. It's probably the number 1 thing that makes me take Zay Jones over him so frequently, is that USC just black cloud hanging over his head. It's like, do I really want to do I want to go this route? Because they have that terrible track record. I mean, and when I call it terrible, I mean just you have this rich history with USC, but with that rich history, there hasn't been a lot of receivers to come out of there and go into the NFL and really tear it up.
I think the last one might have been Keyshawn Johnson, but I mean,
let's talk about it for a sec. Keyshawn Johnson might have been the last one, but is Keyshawn Johnson going to ever go to the Hall of Fame? Probably not.
No.
That's not who he was. I mean, was he a good receiver? Yeah. But is he someone that I wanted to look at and say, I'm going to pick him over this player or this player at the same position during his prime years? No. There was no way I was ever at any point going to take Keyshawn Johnson over a Randy Moss or Terrell Owens or anything, or Isaac Bruce, or none of those guys he was going to come over. Keyshawn Johnson, to me, at his very best, was a top 14 receiver in the NFL, which is still good, but I don't think that he's a player that you look at, you really want to hang your hat on and say, oh, well, he was this, and this, because, he only had, I think, 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons, or 3, something like that, in his 10-year career, 12-year career, whatever it was. He only eclipsed 1,000 yards 3 times. Let's say 3. He only eclipsed 1,000 yards 3 times. I want to say he finished his career with about 55 to 60 touchdowns, 55 to 60. He wasn't truly a dominant receiver. He was what I like to call a top-notch number 2 that can play number 1 sometimes.
Yeah.
That's what Keyshawn Johnson was, and that's what the best receivers from USC has been. So there has been a lot of dominant receivers throughout USC history. So yeah, that black cloud, it hangs over your head when you're sitting there. You're like, Zay Jones, or do I want to go with Juju Smith-Schuster? And you think about that black cloud, and it's like, I don't know. It makes you a little bit nervous there.
For sure. And we can talk about the skill positions all we want, but if you don't have the time to throw the ball, you can't get your skill positions to the ball. And the Rams, they've tried to fix their offensive line. Like we mentioned 2 years ago, they really stocked up on offensive line. Yeah. And that didn't really work. So how do they go about fixing their offensive line in this draft and moving forward?
Oh, man. I think that the biggest mistake they made was the idea that we can just use all of our middle to late round picks and we can just grab a bunch of linemen and one of them has to work, right? No. Because when you look at that draft, they grabbed some of everything. They had guys who were finesse. They had guys who were really smart. They had guys who were big and strong and maulers. They had, decent pass protection, but they didn't really have anyone that was what they needed for a system. They just grabbed some of everything and was like, let's just go do this. Let's just grab linemen. And that's the wrong way to do it. You don't draft guys like that. You want to draft guys who are truly a fit for what you're trying to do. But to do that, you have to have an identity. And I think that Sean McVay is bringing for the first time a true identity. Jeff Fisher wanted to run the power all the time. That's what he's always done since the 1995 season. When he took over, 96 season, when he took over as the head coach for the Oilers, That's what he's done, and he's done it ever since then. But he also wanted to try to spread it out more. And it's something he talked about every year from the time that he took over in St. Louis in 2012, was being able to spread the ball around and, really run some up-tempo. And, you would see some success with it sometimes, but then it would fall apart so quickly because it was like they had enough to last them about 2 games, but they didn't really know how to do it over the course of a full season.
I think they had like a 6-game stretch in Sam Bradford's last year with the team that they tried, and it wasn't working. And then Sean Clemens came in, and they went right back to the power, which is
exactly. So it's like they never really had a true identity because Jeff Fisher wanted to do this, but he also wanted to try something else. That's not a true identity. And I think Sean McVay is going to bring that identity now because he knows what he wants to do on offense. And he's wise enough to know that offense is his forte and defense isn't, which is why Wade Phillips is there. So he can really focus on the offense. I don't think he's going to be worried about the defense too much. It's just going to kind of be what Wade does. So having that identity for the first time, I think that now when you're drafting for the line, you're really focusing on, okay, what do we need to make this offense work? So I think that what they did a couple of years ago wasn't the best way to go about it. But if they were to draft linemen now, I'll probably feel a little more comfortable because there is an identity in place to know what you need in this offensive line to make it click.
And I guess just the last point for discussion, you only have one shot at this draft. There's no mock draft 6.0 in the NFL draft. You get one shot. What would you consider a successful draft, and then what would you consider a failure of a draft?
A successful draft to me for the Rams would be one where you can come away They have 8 picks, and let's just say there's no trading. I obviously don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to trade. But let's just say there's no trading, and you have your 8 picks. If you can come away with 3 players on offense that can make a difference, whether it's whether you get offensive lineman, you can get yourself a receiver, and then either a tight end or a running back. You can come away with 3 players on offense, and then you can come away with a future starting corner and a future starting defensive end. You've succeeded. I put more stock into coming away with a corner and a defensive end because it's all about the pass rush and being able to defend the pass. The Rams have to, and that's a position that hasn't been talked about enough. But defensive end is a huge gaping hole right now. They don't have another starting defensive end. Yeah. It's completely being looked over far too often. But the Rams don't have a starting defensive end. It's a bigger need than what it's getting credit for. Yourself a defensive end. You can find yourself a corner, and you can get yourself 3 players on offense that can make an impact. Offensive line, receiver, and then either tight end or running back. I would call that a win. Now, a loss in the draft would be to try to stock up heavily in one position, like the offensive line, or to go like they did with that, or if they were to go out there and draft a bunch of corners and linebackers. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't be smart. You really want to try to touch on a little bit of everything. I was just, listening to a little bit of NFL Network a couple of days ago, and they were talking about when the oh man, I forget who it was now. Just in the top of my head, they traded away like all of their draft, and they only had 3 or 4 picks or something like that, and they go out there and they hit on all of them. They really go out there and they hit on all of it. Was the Giants? That's what it was, okay. And it was when they drafted Brandon Jacobs, and they drafted Justin Tuck, and they drafted Corey Webster. All of these players became Pro Bowl players. But the year before, they traded up to get Eli Manning, and they traded away that entire part of their draft. They only had 4 picks, and all 4 picks was a hit. From the 2nd, 3rd, Brandon Jacobs was 5th, and they had a 7th round pick.
That's just incredible. Like that. They have 4 picks and they hit on all 4 of them.
They hit on all 4.
The Rams and the Browns and all these teams like this.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, and yeah, that's something that's very hard to do. But every single year, there's a team that hits on the majority of their picks. Every year it's inevitable. It always happens. There's never a draft where there's not a team that doesn't. The Seahawks are who they are now because of that unbelievable 2012 draft where they just were willing and dealing. They were just hitting left and right, and no one knew at the time they were hitting, but they were. And it's always that. It always happens that way, and that's really how you build your team up. Where you can have a strong draft where you're really hitting, then you've built your team for future success. And I think that the Rams really need to focus on trying to find the right players for their system, and then staying away from all the let's branch out and try this and let's go grab this many players at this position. That wouldn't be smart. I think that would result in another failure because that's what you've done and it hasn't worked for you. So why continue to do it?
Exactly. If it's not working, why try it again? It's not a good strategy at all. So I think we covered the draft pretty well. People that will watch this will definitely get a good idea on different scenarios and what could happen, what to expect. Definitely a lot of information in this. So thank you so much for joining the show today. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anytime, man. Anytime.
Oh yeah. Hopefully we can get Josh on next time. He said he wasn't feeling well tonight, so hopefully next time. But I'm Blaine Grisak, and for Misone, this is Ramming Down Your Throat.